In this video, I go over 30 CompTIA Network Plus practice exam questions in real time, highlighting the keywords and phrases in order to answer the question correctly, and then using the process of elimination to rule out the incorrect answers. There are questions from all 5 of the Network Plus domains, and like always, I recommend to try and answer each question to the best of your ability before I solve the question. All right, let's go ahead and start question 1.
Question 1. A technician is troubleshooting a communication issue between two routers on separate networks. MAC addresses are functioning properly, but packets are still not reaching their destination. Which OSI layer is most likely responsible? A. Layer 2, B. Layer 3, C. Layer 5, or D. Layer 4? All right. It's important to know not only the order of the OSI layer, but also what each layer does. And a real quick recap, the OSI layers are going to be physical, data link, network, transport, session, presentation, and application. So let's go ahead and highlight a key phrase for this one. And I would say, without a doubt, the two most important key phrases are communication issue between two routers on separate networks and MAC addresses are functioning properly. So this tells us that layer 2, which is data link, is not the issue since MAC addresses are functioning properly, and that there's something wrong with the actual network itself. So let's go ahead and go through the process of elimination now. And we can start by eliminating A, layer 2, which is the data link layer. This layer, handles MAC addresses and local network communication, but the scenario confirms MAC addresses are working. So we can go ahead and rule this one out. Next, we can eliminate D, layer 4, which is the transport layer. This layer provides reliable end-to-end connections, but it's important to know that for layer 4 to function correctly, the network layer has already done its job. And finally, we can rule out C, layer 5. Which is the session layer. And this layer manages sessions between applications, but it's completely irrelevant until successful data transfer is established. And that leaves us with B, layer 3, which is the network layer. And this layer is responsible for routing and logical addressing such as IP addresses, which directly applies when packets fail to reach across different networks. Question 2. An admin is setting up a router at a remote site with only one connection to the internet. They need a routing method that is low maintenance, simple to configure, and doesn't use dynamic updates. What should they use? A. BGP, B. EIGRP, C. Static routing, or D. OSPF? All right, so the biggest key phrase for this one is doesn't use dynamic updates. And if you know which one of these doesn't use dynamic updates, that pretty much gives you the answer. And this one also requires you to read the question closely. So let's go ahead and do the process of elimination. We can start by eliminating A, BGP, and that stands for Border Gateway Protocol. BGP is intended for routing between large autonomous systems such as ISPs, but it's highly complex and completely unnecessary for like a single path office setup. Next, we can eliminate B, EIGRP, which is Enhanced Interior Gateway Routing Protocol. And this is a Cisco protocol that adapts to changes in the network and provides quick convergence, but it's pretty overkill for a one-path route like the scenario is requesting. And finally, we can rule out D, OSPF, which stands for Open Shortest Path First. And this is a dynamic link state protocol that continuously recalculates best paths. It's efficient, but it is overkill. And that leaves us with the answer, which is C, static routing. And this is a routing method that is manually configured and doesn't change unless someone modifies it. And it's perfect for small, unchanging networks where simplicity is the priority. And it also does not provide dynamic updates. Question 3. A company is designing a network that must maintain high uptime with minimal interruptions. When evaluating system recovery performance, which metric should be kept as low as possible to support high availability? A. MTBF, B. RPO, C. MTTR, or D. MATR? All right, the key phrases here are going to be high uptime with minimal interruptions and also low as possible to support high availability. Let's go ahead and go through the process of elimination. And right away, we can start by eliminating D, MATR. This is just a completely made up acronym. Next, we can eliminate B, RPO. And RPO is recovery point objective. And this focuses on data loss, but has nothing to do with downtime. And finally, we can eliminate A, MTBF. And this is mean time between failures. This measures the expected time between issues, and you want this to be high, not low. And that leaves us with C, MTTR, which is mean time to repair. And at the end of the day, the faster a system can be repaired after a failure, the less impact it will have on the availability. Question 4. A company wants to secure its website using encrypted communication over the web. To implement HTTPS and establish trust with browsers, what is required? A. A private key. B. An A record. C. A firewall rule. Or D. A certificate. All right, the key phrase here is secure its website. Knowing how a website is actually secured, more specifically how HTTPS is applied, pretty much gives you the answer here. So let's go ahead and go through the process of elimination. We can first eliminate A, a private key. This is used in the encryption process, but it alone is not sufficient. Next, we can eliminate B, an A record. This is also known as the IP address, by resolving the domain. But this does not provide security. And finally, we can eliminate C, a firewall rule. Now, firewall rules control traffic flow on a network, but it is unrelated to enabling HTTPS encryption. And that leaves us with D, a certificate. And a certificate is mandatory for HTTPS to function, which enables browser trust and encrypted connections. This certificate is provided by a CA, also known as the Certificate Authority, and is required for HTTPS encrypted traffic. Question 5. A technician is preparing for an on-site network diagnostic and gathers tools to test physical layer components. Which of the following is not considered a physical tool? A. Wire map tester. B. Spectrum analyzer. C. Cable tester. Or D. Bandwidth tester. All right, so I would say that the key to this one is in the question, and that's not considered a physical tool. So let's go ahead and do the process of elimination. And you can start by eliminating C first, cable tester. Now, this is a tool that physically connects to cables to test them for things like continuity, shorts, or breaks in the wiring. Next, we can eliminate B, spectrum analyzer. This measures and visualizes signal interference in things like wireless frequencies, and this is a physical tool. And finally, we can eliminate A, wire map tester. Now, this is also a physical tool, and it checks the wiring order in twisted pair cables and also identifies things like shorts or misfires. And that leaves us with D, bandwidth speed tester. And remember, the answer is something that is not a physical tool. And a bandwidth speed tester is typically a software application used to test throughput. Also, before I forget, if you're wanting to watch more of these Network Plus videos, be sure to take a look at the playlist that I linked in the description. I have other videos. Question 6. An engineer is helping redesign a network to improve how data moves between different subnets. The client wants a device that can make forwarding decisions based on IP addresses and allow segmentation of broadcast domains. Which of the following is most appropriate? A. Load balancer, B. Router, C. Switch, or D. Access point? All right, so the key for this one is can make forwarding decisions based on IP addresses. Now, this alone, according to CompTIA, gives us the answer. So let's go ahead and do the process elimination. We can start by right away eliminating D, access point. Now, an access point provides wireless connectivity and bridges wireless clients to like a wired network, but does not make decisions based on IP addresses. Next, we can eliminate A, load balancer. And a load balancer distributes traffic across multiple servers, but it doesn't route between networks or segment broadcast domains. And finally, we can rule out C, switch. And a switch works at layer 2 and uses MAC addresses, not IPs. It also doesn't segment broadcast domains unless VLANs are involved. And that leaves us with B, router. A router operates on layer 3, which is the network layer, and a router forwards packets based on the IP addresses. Now, I do want to add something. There is something called a layer 3 switch, which is essentially a router, switch combo. Now, according to CompTIA, it's important to know that unless CompTIA mentions it specifically, a router and a switch are two completely different things. Question 7. An inexperienced technician enables every available routing protocol on all routers across the network, thinking it will improve redundancy. What is the most likely outcome of this configuration? A. Faster response. B. Disabled routes. C. Higher available bandwidth. Or D. High CPU usage. Okay, so the key for this one is thinking it will improve redundancy. Now, when a question is laid out like that, most of the time the answer is going to be the opposite, all right? So let's go ahead and do the process elimination. We can first start by eliminating A, faster response. Now, more protocols do not mean better performance. In fact, it can actually mean the complete opposite. Next, we can eliminate B, disabled routes. Now, while route filtering or administrative distance can prevent certain routes from being used, it's usually not the most immediate or likely consequence. And finally, we can eliminate C, higher available bandwidth. Now, routing protocols do not increase bandwidth, they actually use it up, and that sometimes actually reduces availability. And that leaves us with D, high CPU usage. Each protocol consumed processing power, right? And enabling all of them needlessly burdens the router. So D is the answer. Question 8. A security team wants to monitor log data and detect suspicious behavior across multiple devices in real time. They need a tool that not only collects and stores logs, but also analyzes them and generates alerts. Which technology best fits this need? A SIM, B, syslog, C, packet sniffer, or D, NetFlow? All right, if you know what the differences are for these, this is a pretty easy one. There are a couple key phrases here, but the most important one is analyzes them and generates alerts. All right. So right away, we can start by eliminating D, NetFlow. NetFlow is useful for understanding traffic patterns, but it doesn't analyze logs or detect threats in real time. Next, we can eliminate C, packet sniffer. And a packet sniffer captures raw traffic for manual inspection. It It's also not automated and doesn't generate security alerts. And finally, we can eliminate B, syslog. Now, syslog transmits event logs but lacks analysis or alerting features. It's primarily used as just like a transport mechanism, although it is used sometimes to feed logs into the SIM. And that brings us to the answer, which is A, SIM. Now, SIM stands for Security Information and Event Management. And this is a system that is designed for central log collection and also real-time threat detection. Question 9. A business client based in the EU must ensure specific types of personal or sensitive data remain physically stored within the region's borders. Which of the following regulations or principles is most likely driving this requirement? A, HIPAA, B, GDPR, C, data locality, or D, PCI DSS? All right, so the key to this question is data remain physically stored within the region's borders. So let's go ahead and do the process of elimination. We can start by first eliminating A, HIPAA. Now, this is a US law governing healthcare data and privacy and security. Next, we can eliminate D, PCI DSS. And this sets standards for securing things like payment card data, but does not dictate, any residency requirements. And finally, we can eliminate B, GDPR. And GDPR, that regulates the privacy and handling of personal data in the EU, but doesn't explicitly require data to remain inside the EU like this scenario is requiring. And that leaves us with C, data locality. This principle enforces where data is physically stored, and it often requires it to remain in the same country or region for compliance reasons. Question 10. A technician is trying to trace a specific copper cable through a bundle by using a tone probe. To detect the signal on the cable, which tool must be used alongside the tone probe? A, tone generator, B, light meter, C, multimeter, or D, cable tester? All right, kind of a short question, but the key phrase for this one is simply use alongside. So let's go ahead and do the process elimination now. We can first start by eliminating D, cable tester. This is a tool that verifies cables like integrity and wiring, but it isn't used alongside a tone probe. Next, we can eliminate B, light meter. Simply this tool measures signal strength in fiber optic cables, but not copper. And finally, we can eliminate C, multimeter. And multimeters are used for electrical testing like, voltage or resistance, but doesn't interact with a tone probe. And that leaves us with A, tone generator. And this tool emits the signal that the tone probe listens for. Essentially making it pretty essential to work alongside the tone probe.
Real quick, if you're enjoying these types of questions and want even harder questions, I do have a 270 question practice exam on Udemy. These are 390 question practice exams that are timed and formatted similar to the ones you'll see when you sit for the exam. And of course, like always, if you're not wanting to purchase them, that's okay. I will be posting more free videos right here on YouTube. If you are interested, I run deals and sales all the time, and you can check if there's a sale going on right now by taking a look at the pinned comment in this video or the link in the description. Okay, enough chatting. Let's get back to question 11.
Question 11. A workstation is assigned the IP address 192.168.1.100. What category does this address fall under? A, private class A, B, public class A, C, class C, or D, class B? All right, that was kind of hard to read. Okay, there really isn't a key phrase here. You just have to know which class 192.168.1.100 falls under in order to get it right. So sorry for not able to highlight anything here. But let's go ahead and do the process of elimination. Let's go ahead and first eliminate B, public class A. Public class A's IP range is from 1.0.0.0 to 127.0.0.0. Next, we can eliminate D, which is class B. Not trying to confuse you. Class B includes IPs from 128.0.0.0 to 192.256 or 255, 255, 255. And finally, we can eliminate A, private class A. The IPs in private class A falls within 10.0.0.0 and 10.255.255.255, if I remember right. And that leaves us with C, which is class C. The IPs in this range fall between range 192.168.0.0 to 192.168.255.255 for private, and also 192.0.0.0 to 223.255.255.0 for public. Question 12. An inventory manager needs to monitor and scan equipment that lacks an internal power supply. They want a solution that allows the device to transmit identifying information when scanned without relying on a battery. Which technology is best suited for this task? A, 802.11, B, RFID, C, NFC, or D, Bluetooth. All right, the key for this one is device without built-in power source. So let's go ahead and do the process of elimination now. We can start by eliminating A, 802.11. This is a Wi-Fi technology, which, requires a power source and is not practical. So this one's way wrong. Next, we can eliminate D, Bluetooth. Bluetooth also requires continuous power, which would make it unsuitable for things like batteryless devices. I'm not even sure if batteryless is a correct way of saying that, but you get the point. And finally, we can eliminate C, NFC. Now, technically, NFC does not require power, but it only works over very, very short distances. If RFID was not on the list, this would be the answer. However, the question is discussing tracking, and NFC would not be a better solution than RFID. Which leaves us with the answer, which is B, RFID. And these are passive tags that work without their own power, making them ideal for low maintenance asset tracking. Question 13. A network engineer is developing a set of guidelines that define the steps and approval process required when making updates to the network infrastructure, such as installing or removing equipment. What type of documentation is the engineer creating? A, MOU, B, baseline configuration, C, change management, or D, SLA. All right, so the key phrase for this one is guidelines that define the steps and approval process. Let's go ahead and start the process of elimination. We can first eliminate A, MOU, which stands for Memorandum of Understanding. And this is a formal agreement between parties that defines responsibilities. Next, we can eliminate D, SLA, which stands for Service Level Agreement. And this focuses on performance guarantees and service expectations, but it has nothing to do with making updates. And finally, we can eliminate B, baseline configuration. And a baseline configuration establishes a known state of a system, but has nothing to do with procedures for managing changes. And that leaves us with C, change management. And this defines the required steps, approvals, and even tracking needed for making changes. And this is something that you will deal with just about every day in one way or another in IT. Question 14. An organization is securing a facility with programmable logic controllers, also known as PLCs, and SCADA systems. They need to segment and manage access to these industrial control systems separately from the corporate IT network. Which segmentation approach is most appropriate? A, IoT, B, OT, C, IIoT, or D, 802.1x? All right, the key phrases for this one are industrial control systems and I would also say segmentation approach. Let's go ahead and do the process of elimination now. And we can start by eliminating D, 802.1x. Now, this is a network access control protocol focused on authentication, not segmentation. Next, we can eliminate A, IoT. And IoT stands for Internet of Things. And these are, things like consumer grade smart devices like light bulbs or cameras. And finally, we can eliminate IIoT. And this is similar to IoT, except it's industrial Internet of Things. And these are things such as smart sensors and devices in industrial environments, but they don't directly address segmentation. And that leaves us with B, OT, which is operational technology. This refers to the dedicated hardware and software that is used in industrial environments to manage things like physical device and processes. Now, it's used in practice with segmenting and securing SCADA. Question 15, halfway there. An engineer discovers that STP has been misconfigured on the network. Which of the following problems most likely revealed this issue? A, routing loops. B, duplicate IP addresses. C, switching loops. Or D, ARP table corruption. All right, so the key for this one is most likely revealed the issue. So it is also key to understand STP issues in order to get this one right. So we can first eliminate D, ARP table corruption. Now this is an IP to MAC mapping problem, and they're not directly tied to STP, but it's also not within the exam objectives. Next, we can eliminate A, routing loops. And these are layer 3 problems caused by routing protocol errors, which are unrelated to STP. And finally, we can eliminate B, duplicate IP addresses. Now, this is caused by IP assignment conflicts, typically involving DHCP or static IP mismanagement. And that leaves us with C, switching loops. So STP prevents loops in layer 2 switching environments. If it's misconfigured or disabled, loops can form and flood the network. And this is commonly referred to as something called a broadcast storm. Question 16. A technician is diagnosing why certain packets are being dropped by a network switch. After checking the capture logs, they notice that some frames are shorter than expected. Based on Ethernet standards, what is the minimum valid size an Ethernet frame must be to avoid being discarded? A, 64 bytes, B, 1500 bytes, C, 1500 bits, or D, 64 bits. All right, so the key for this one is minimum valid size an Ethernet frame must be to avoid being discarded. So let's go ahead and do the process of elimination here. We can first eliminate C, 1500 bits. And 1500 bits, far exceeds the minimum frame size. Next, we can eliminate B, 1500 bytes. And this actually represents the maximum payload size, not the minimum. And finally, we can eliminate D, 64 bits. This is equivalent to only 8 bytes, which is far too small to be a valid Ethernet frame. And that leaves us with A, 64 bytes. Now, Ethernet frames must be at least 64 bytes in length to be considered valid under the IEEE 802.3 standard. Question 17. A network engineer is configuring route advertisements between two different organizations' networks. They need a protocol designed to exchange routing information between autonomous systems. Which of the following should be used? A. RIP, B. ISIS, C. BGP, or D. OSPF? All right, so the key phrase for this one is exchange routing information between autonomous systems. So let's go ahead and do the process of elimination. We can first eliminate A, RIP, and RIP stands for Routing Information Protocol, and it's an interior gateway protocol, also known as an IGP, used within a single autonomous system. Next, we can eliminate ISIS, and ISIS stands for Intermediate System to Intermediate System, and it's a link state IGP used internally, not for inter-autonomous system communications. And finally, we can eliminate D, OSPF. And we saw that earlier, and that stands for Open Shortest Path First. This is another IGP meant for use inside a single organization, not between external networks. And that leaves us with C, BGP, which we also saw earlier. And that stands for Border Gateway Protocol. And BGP is designed specifically for routing between autonomous systems and is also the backbone of the internet. Question 18. You are developing an incident response policy and need to determine which system to recover first after an outage. Which of the following metrics is most relevant to prioritizing recovery efforts? A. ACL, B. RTO, C. MTTR, or D. RPO? All right, so the key phrase for this one is most relevant to prioritizing recovery efforts. And we can start off the process of elimination by eliminating A, ACL, which is access control lists. This is used for permissions and access management, but it's not related in any way to instant recovery timelines. Next, we can eliminate D, RPO, which is recovery point objective. Now, this focuses on how much data loss is tolerable, not how fast a system must be brought back online. And finally, we can eliminate C, MTTR, which we saw this earlier. That is mean time to repair. Now, this indicates how quickly something can be fixed once identified, but not how important it is to fix it. And that leaves us with B, RTO, which is not request time off, but is recovery time objective. This defines the maximum acceptable downtime before a system must be restored. Now, if you ever have to deal with disaster recovery or business continuity, just remember it's a key metric for deciding which systems are most critical to recover quickly. Question 19. Two systems need to exchange encrypted data without having a shared key beforehand. One system encrypts with a public key and the other decrypts with a private key. What type of encryption is being used? A. Symmetrical encryption, B. Asymmetrical encryption, C. SAML, or D. AES? All right, the key phrase for this one is public key and private key. So let's go ahead and do the process of elimination. We can start by eliminating C, SAML, which stands for Security Assertion Markup Language. SAML is used for things like federated authentication and not encryption. Next, we can eliminate D, AES, which is Advanced Encryption Standard. This is an encryption method that does not involve key pairs. And finally, we can eliminate A, Symmetrical Encryption. Now, this method uses a single shared key, which must be known by both parties in advance. And finally, that leaves us with B, Asymmetrical Encryption. Now, asymmetrical encryption involves a public and a private key pair. So just like the scenario is requesting. Question 20. Marketing employees report they can browse the internet but can't access their internal file server. Lewis, a technician, confirms internet access works but cannot ping the file server. What is the most likely cause? A. DHCP is down. B. Port security is enabled. C. VLAN is configured incorrectly. Or D. Incorrect default gateway. All right, so the key to this one is can browse the internet. And also I would say cannot ping the file server. So this indicates that there's a routing issue, most likely with the traffic. But let's go ahead and go through the process of elimination. We can first start by eliminating A, DHCP is down. Now, if DHCP were unavailable, no one would most likely be able to access the internet because they wouldn't have an IP address. Next, we can eliminate B, port security is enabled. Now, port security restricts access based on MAC addresses or traffic limits, but wouldn't allow consistent internet access and block only internal traffic. And finally, we can eliminate D, incorrect default gateway. Now, an incorrect gateway would more likely break internet access altogether, not local server communications. And that leaves us with C, VLAN is configured incorrectly. Now, if the workstations and the file server are on different VLANs and routing on those VLANs is misconfigured, then devices in one VLAN would not be able to communicate with another in a different VLAN. Question 21. A company's development team needs an environment to build and test applications without managing servers or infrastructure. They want to focus only on coding and deploying apps, while the provider handles the platform and runtime environment. Which service model best fits this use case? A. HAAS, B. PAAS, C. NAAS, or D. SAAS. All right, so the key phrase here is focus only on coding and deploying apps. There are more key phrases, but this one to me stands out the most. So let's go ahead and do the process of elimination now. We can first rule out A, HAAS. Now, HAAS stands for hardware as a service, but it's a term rarely used anymore. And it's also not within the scope for the N10009 exam objectives. Next, we can eliminate D, SAAS. And this is software as a service. And this allows users to access fully functional applications over the internet, but doesn't allow for development or customization. And finally, we can eliminate C, NAAS, which is network as a service. This is used for things like virtualized network infrastructure, but it's also not on the exam objectives as well. And it's plain wrong. And that leaves us with B, PAAS, which is platform as a service. And this service is ideal for people like developers who want to write code and deploy apps without handling servers, operating systems, or even things like backend management. Question 22. A technician is setting up wireless security for a small office and chooses a method where users must enter the same password as configured on the access point to connect. Which WLAN security option relies on this shared string? A, PSK, B, 802.1x, C, MAC address filtering, or D, disabling SSID broadcast. All right, so the key for this one is same password as configured on the access point. And I would also say shared string. So let's go ahead and do the process of elimination. And right off the bat, we can start by eliminating D, disabling SSID broadcast. Now, this will only hide the network name, but it has nothing to do with any sort of matching. Next, we can eliminate C, MAC address filtering. And this filters access based on hardware addresses, not passwords. And finally, we can eliminate B, 802.1x. Now, this method uses certificates or credentials with a radius server, but no pre-shared passwords or string is involved at all. That leaves us with A, PSK, which stands for pre-shared key, and PSK uses a shared string that must match on both ends for the connection to succeed. Question 23. A network administrator is configuring DNS settings for a device with an IPv6 address. To allow reverse lookups from the address to the host name, which DNS record type should be used? A, TXT, B, name server, C, PTR, or D, CNAME. All right, I would say it's a simple key phrase, and that is just IPv6 address. So let's go ahead and do the process of elimination. We can start by eliminating A, TXT record. A text record stores descriptive text in DNS records and is often used for verification for things like email security, but it has nothing to do with address mapping. Next, we can eliminate B, name server. And a name server indicates which servers are authoritative for a DNS zone, but it does not perform any address resolution. And finally, we can eliminate D, CNAME. And a CNAME creates an alias from one domain to another, but does not map directly to an IP address. And that leaves us with C, PTR, also known as pointer records. Now, these records are used for reverse DNS lookups. They are designed to map specifically IP addresses to different host names. Question 24. An attacker gains unauthorized access to a company's network and extracts sensitive customer information, such as names, addresses, and financial details. This action is primarily a violation of which security principle? A, availability, B, integrity, C, confidentiality, or D, non-repudiation. All right, so the key phrase for this one is extracts sensitive customer information. And we can start off the process of elimination by first getting rid of A, availability. And availability refers to ensuring systems and data are accessible when needed, has nothing to do with customer information. Next, we can eliminate D, non-repudiation. And non-repudiation, that is more about ensuring actions can be traced to their source, but has nothing to do with data exposure. And finally, we can eliminate B, integrity. And integrity in InfoSec refers to ensuring data hasn't been tampered with. So this specific scenario involves theft and not alteration. And that leaves us with the answer, which is C, confidentiality. And this principle protects against unauthorized access to private or sensitive information. Question 25. You're working on a network outage and have already identified a possible reason for the issue. According to the structured troubleshooting process, what should you do next? A, document findings, actions, and outcomes. B, implement a solution or escalate if needed. C, test the theory to determine the cause. Or D, establish a plan of action. All right, so the key to this troubleshooting question is already identified a possible reason for the issue. So let's go ahead and do the process of elimination now. And we can start by eliminating A, document findings, actions, and outcomes. This is done at the end of the process, after resolving the issue. Next, we can eliminate B, implement a solution or escalate if necessary. Now, this step is done after confirming your theory is valid. And finally, we can eliminate D, establish a plan of action. So this step pretty much follows the confirmation of the root cause, okay? So you can only plan your fix after validating your diagnosis. And that leaves us with C, test the theory to determine the cause. Once you develop your hypothesis, you do this step immediately after to pretty much just test your theory. Question 26. A network administrator notices a traffic flow exceeding its allowed transmission rate under the company's QoS policy. The system needs to ensure this doesn't negatively affect other prioritized traffic. What action should be taken? A. Buffer the extra packets. B. Discard packets beyond the allowed rate. C. Raise the traffic threshold. Or D. Widen the bandwidth cap. All right. So the key phrase for this one is, I would say, QoS policy, and ensure this doesn't negatively affect other prioritized traffic. So let's now go ahead and do the process of elimination here. And right away, we can start by eliminating A, buffer the extra packets. Now, buffering can lead to delay and is not ideal for real-time enforcement of QoS limits. Also, QoS, that stands for quality of service, by the way. Next, we can eliminate C, raise the traffic threshold. Doing this pretty much undermines the QoS policy completely and could impact other traffic classes negatively, so not this one. And finally, we can eliminate D, widen the bandwidth cap. Now, this ignores the policy's intent and can also cause harm, harm the overall network performance. This is definitely not it. You don't want to allow more than the permitted limit. That leaves us with B, discard packet beyond the allowed rate. And dropping packets is a common mechanism in QoS enforcement to maintain things like, bandwidth guarantees. Question 27. A user reports that their desktop keeps rebooting unexpectedly, even when performing light tasks. To help identify the root cause, which system metric should the technician check first? A, memory usage, B, temperature, C, RAM usage, or B, CPU usage. So the biggest key phrase here is even when performing light tasks. So let's go ahead and do the process of elimination. And we can start by eliminating D, CPU usage. And a high CPU load may slow a system or cause freezing, but it won't typically cause frequent restarts, especially when it says performing light tasks. Next, we can eliminate A, memory usage. Now, high memory usage may slow performance, but it rarely causes spontaneous reboots. And finally, we can eliminate C, RAM usage. Like memory usage, high RAM usage typically causes sluggish behavior, not random reboots. And that leaves us with B, temperature. And overheating triggers automatic reboots or shutdowns as like a protective measure, which would make this the most likely cause, to investigate given the other possible answers. Question 28. A technician is reviewing DHCP configurations and notices an unfamiliar setting listed among the scope options. They want to verify which setting does not belong. Which of the following is not a valid DHCP scope option? A, DNS server, B, default gateway, C, lease duration, or D, routing protocol. All right, so the key to this one is not a valid DHCP scope option. And to kick things off, we can start by eliminating C, lease duration. This defines how long a DHCP assigned IP address is valid, and it is part of the DHCP scope settings. Next, we can eliminate A, DNS server. And this is a very common DHCP option that tells clients where to resolve domain names. And finally, we can eliminate B, default gateway. And this is another common and standard option that provides, the IP address of the local router. And that leaves us with D, routing protocol. And it's important to know that DHCP does not assign or configure routing protocols. That's handled at the router level, not through DHCP. Question 29. A technician suspects a rogue DHCP server is operating on the network, assigning incorrect settings to client devices. Which of the following could not be assigned to a device by any DHCP server? A, MAC address, B, DNS server, C, default gateway address, or D, IP address. All right, so the key phrase here is could not be assigned. And the question is pretty much asking, what can a DHCP server not assign to a device? And that's key to knowing. So let's go into the process of elimination now. And we can start by eliminating D, IP address. I mean, this is one of DHCP's primary functions, is to assign an IP address within a given scope. Next, we can eliminate C, default gateway address. Another common DHCP option is to tell things like clients where to send traffic destined for external networks. And finally, we can eliminate B, DNS server. And DHCP can provide clients with the IP address of a DNS resolver during the lease process. And that leaves us with the answer, which is A, MAC address. And DHCP has no authority to assign or even alter a device's MAC address. It's pretty much a static value unless manually spoofed by the device itself. Question 30. You are troubleshooting a network issue on a Mac OS device. You need to determine the computer's current IP settings. Which tool would best allow you to see this information quickly? A, NSLOOKUP, B, ifconfig, C, dig, or D, ipconfig. All right, the key phrase for this last question is Mac OS. That's important. And I would also say current IP settings. So let's go ahead and do the process of elimination now. We can first start by eliminating A, NSLOOKUP. And NSLOOKUP is primarily used for DNS lookups, not for checking the IP settings on a Mac. Next, we can eliminate dig. And dig is also used for DNS, more so for like querying the DNS settings. It's used to return the name resolution results, not IP address settings. And finally, we can eliminate ipconfig, which is D. ipconfig is a Windows-only command. That's important to know. Now, if this scenario is talking about a Windows machine, this would be the answer. And with that said, that leaves us with the answer to this final question, question 30, which is B, ifconfig. And ifconfig is the Mac version of ipconfig. Well, it's a, Mac and Linux. And this command is designed to show you active IP configuration and interface details directly on Mac OS systems.
And that wraps up this practice exam. If you don't want to miss out on any new videos right here on YouTube, make sure you subscribe and also let me know when you pass. I love hearing when people pass. Anyways, like always, good luck and have fun.